The first impression that comes to our mind about any college: tall buildings, big classrooms, large lobby areas, thick books, IT labs, assignments, class tests, and projects, nothing besides that. Every hour, minute, second spent here help us carving and shaping our persona, cultivating innovative mindsets for the challenging world. Learning is a lifelong process. Sharing knowledge, inculcating values of life, spark the innovative horizons of mind. Fun and frolic is the nature of every nook and corner here. A daily dose of thrill we are sure to get here.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. I, Pramod Kumar Pandey, welcome you to the day 2 of Gandhi Shastri Jayanti 2021, organized by RIM, that is Research and Innovation in Media, which is the research center of DME Media School, DME Noida. I would now like to take a moment and introduce Delhi Metropolitan Education. Delhi Metropolitan Education is an A-grade premier educational institute affiliated to Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, New Delhi, and approved by the Bar Council of India. The institute offers BBA, BA LLB, BBA LLB with BCI approval and BA JNC programs. DME believes in imparting world-class education to its students while training them to develop and enhance their skills. This education and training enables them in taking up challenges of the industry and creating a space for themselves with their competence and vigor. DME Media School is one of the most promising media institutes in the country. It offers BA in journalism and mass communication. It is recognized as a school focused on the growth of its faculty and students through academic and co-curricular activities. Major flagship events and initiatives of the school include BG Varghese Lecture Series, Peer-to-Peer FTP, International Film Festival SIFI, International Conference ICANN, and Vritika Convention of Media Students. Now, I would also like to tell you a little bit about RIM, that is Research and Innovation in Media, the research center for DME Media School. Well, as the research center of Media School at DME, we are dedicated to explore the ever-changing dimensions of media and mass communication. Our vision is to synthesize the critical aspects of media and bring out important insights that can be used by the practitioners to bring quality to the domain. We look forward to building ideas and innovate for a better contribution. RIM takes up formative as well as exploratory researches, and for having a better understanding of the media world and its functioning, applied researches are also taken up by the faculty members who are part of RIM. Today we have with us now, I would like to bring your attention to our guest for the day. We have with us Professor Mrinal Chatterjee, who is Professor and Regional Director at IIMC Dhenkanal, Odisha. He is a journalist turned media academician. Professor Mrinal Chatterjee has worked in all media forms, and currently he is working as the Regional Director of the Eastern India campus of the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, IIMC Dhenkanal, Odisha. Dr. Chatterjee has published 7 books on journalism and mass communication in English and Odia, including his seminal work on the history of journalism in Odisha. He, along with his co-author, they have edited an anthology of essays titled Gandhi as a Journalist and Editor. It has been published in Odia as well. An accomplished fiction writer, he has published 7 novels and 6 short story collections, many of which have been translated into several other Indian and foreign languages. With this, I welcome Professor Mrinal Chatterjee. And before we go on and listen to his insightful views on Mahatma Gandhi, I would request Professor Dr. Amrish Saxena, sir, Dean DME Media School, to kindly begin the program with his welcome address.
Thank you, Pramod. So obviously, this is a matter of pleasure, pride that we have today Professor Mrinal Chatterjee with us. And he is a very senior journalist turned media educator, and the kind of work that he has done in various areas of journalism. And again, the important thing about him is that he is working not only in English, but in Odia as well, and which is actually the need of the hour. The way the journalism is growing, there is constant need for the growth of language journalism, journalism that is practiced, that's pursued in different Indian languages. So he has made a big contribution that way. And if I can talk about the program that we have organized, DME Media School has organized, since last year, we conceived this idea that let us celebrate this Gandhi Jayanti and Shastri Jayanti as a 2-day program, wherein one day is not exactly, but broadly, we are more talking about Shastri ji and his contribution, and the other day we are talking more about the contribution of Mahatma Gandhi. So last year on the first day, so this 2-day is always on first and second. So this year also, this is on 1st of October and the 2nd of October. Last year on 1st of October, we invited Mr. Sunil Shastri, who is the elder son of late Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri. And this year, that is yesterday, we had the program wherein Mr. Anil Shastri, the younger son of late Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, he joined the session. And second year that happened last year as well, we had a session on the ideology and the contribution of Mahatma Gandhi. So this year we thought there can be no better person than Mridul Chatterjee ji, because he has worked on Mahatma Gandhi and he has his complete book on Mahatma Gandhi. And I've been reading about the book, some excerpts of the book, and some reviews about the book. So that motivated me to invite him and to talk about Mahatma Gandhi, his ideology, his work, his contribution. And as this is a compilation of the essays, the book that Mridul Chatterjee has written, that is on Mahatma Gandhi, a journalist and editor. So as journalists, we all know him as a person who brought freedom to this country and who got us out of the slavery of the alien rule, of the British rule. But then Mahatma Gandhi has so many facets, and whatever he did for the country, for the freedom of the country, for the society. So there are many intricate things which all we must know, particularly the younger generation should know all about this, the things that he did for the social reformation, for the political reformation, or for the economic information, the economic model that he gave, wherein the village was in the center. Again, we are coming back to, after 70 years, we are coming back to the same kind of model, wherein we believe now, again, that this village has to be a self-sustained unit as far as the economy is concerned, or the well-being of the people is concerned, or as far as the development is concerned. Similarly, about the political model which he talks about should be such which is devoid of any concentration of power. And we more and more are realizing in today's time that concentration of power is not good for the country. And obviously, for at the social level, whatever he did to bring people of different religions together, to bring people of different castes together, and that is how to unite the country to become one entity. Again, we are feeling there is a grave need of that in today's time. And since all these essays have been compiled touching upon all these areas by Professor Mridul Chatterjee, so that is how we will request him to touch upon these things, these contribution in different spheres, in different areas of Mahatma Gandhi, and how he as a journalist, and then obviously the important thing that we all must know as teachers and media, as media students, that Mahatma Gandhi above all was a journalist. And then we must also understand and realize this, how journalism can be used for the betterment of the society. Journalism is a big tool. Nowadays, whatever is happening, maybe that's not the right kind of use of journalism, but journalism is a very strong tool if you want to bring a change in the society, and if you want to see to this that the country moves forward. So without wasting much time, we are all eager to listen to Professor Mrinal Chatterjee. So welcome, Mr. Chatterjee, to this program, and then we are looking forward to listening to you. Over to you, Pramod.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, before we move on to Mrinal, sir, I would just like to share a small audio visual on the life of Mahatma Gandhi that's prepared by students.
The seeds of Gandhi's trust with India's freedom movement were sown on the night of 7 June 1893, when he was traveling to Pretoria in the first class compartment of the train. He was pushed out of the train because of the color of the skin. Should I fight for my right or go back to India? Or should I go on Pretoria without minding the insults and returning to India after finishing the cases? Were some of the thoughts going on in the minds of Gandhiji. Gandhi decided to stay back and fight against apartheid. Such was his fame and inspiration in his native country that he was called as Mahatma as soon as he landed on Indian soil. Later, Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore and many others also termed the great freedom fighter as Mahatma, resulting in the word becoming synonymous with Gandhi's name. Gandhi's idea of ahimsa, non-cooperation and satyagraha inspired many to fight for their own independence. Nelson Mandela, once speaking to APJ Kalam, said, "India gave us MK Gandhi. We gave you back Mahatma Gandhi after 2 decades." Mahatma Gandhi was an apostle of non-violence. The Tibetan spiritual guru in exile while accepting the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo in 1989 remembered Gandhi and said it was a tribute to the man who founded the modern tradition of non-violent action for change. Mahatma Gandhi, whose life taught and inspired me. Albert Einstein described Gandhi as generation to come. It may well be, will Grace believe that such a man as this, whenever in flesh and blood, walk upon this earth. During his student days in London, having many European friends and co-workers, Gandhi felt that European civilization had been weighed in the balance during the First World War and found wanting. Gandhi believed that it was possible to alert, and that it was his duty to alert even those committed to authoritarian rule to possibilities of non-violence, not as a weapon of the weak but of the spiritually superior.
Okay, sir, Mrinal sir, now we want to listen to you. Thank you very much for being so patient with so many, things shown in between. The platform is all yours, sir.
Thank you. Let me first pay my tribute to the great soul. On 1948, he departed. He was killed. But after so many years of death of Gandhi, on this day, we remember, the entire world remembers him. And that shows the greatness of the man. Today, we will be discussing about a facet of Gandhi, which is not very well known beyond the journalistic fraternity. Not many people know that Gandhi was a journalist, and Gandhi the journalist predates Gandhi the Mahatma for about 20 odd years. In my book, Gandhi as a journalist and Mahatma, which I co-edited with Snehashish Shur, we say that it was journalist Gandhi, or it was journalism as a profession, that shaped Gandhi to become Mahatma, that shaped Gandhi to engage with social issues, that probably triggered the the concepts about social change, the concepts about changes in the society, political changes, economic changes, all those concepts were triggered and brought out thanks to his engagement with journalism. That's what we feel. Now let's begin with at the beginning. It's interesting to know that Gandhi didn't read a newspaper till he reached England at the age of 19. In fact, in his autobiography, he said that I first read a newspaper after I reached London, right? And his first foray into journalism was as a food writer. I mean, these days, many people write food blogs, isn't it? So Gandhi also started his journalistic career as probably a food quote unquote blogger, because blog was not a word then. Blog is used now. So he started writing in a paper called Vegetarian. There was a vegetarian society in London. He was a vegetarian. He became a member of that, and he wrote articles in Vegetarian. So that was the beginning. And this triggered the Gandhi who wants to connect with people. Those of you who are aware about his early life, he was a shy kind of a young man. He was not very outspoken. He was not very extrovert to begin with. Writing and getting published, it got him an opportunity to connect with people. So his early engagement with writing, his early engagement with journalism, he wrote letters to the editor, he wrote reports, this and that, was triggered by this element of power to connect with people. People will read what I have in mind. People will know what I am reading, what I'm writing for them. So that probably triggered this engagement. Now, he went back home, and from there also he wrote to Vegetarian from India, which was published on 9th and 16th April 1892 or so. That was the beginning. Then Gandhi stayed in Britain for 3 years. He wrote for Vegetarian and other sundry newspapers. He came back to India. Shortly, he stayed in Mumbai. During his short stay in Mumbai, he got in touch with the newspapers, right? So his kind of initiation into writing in newspapers started early. Then he went to South Africa. It was in South Africa that Gandhi, as a social activist, and Gandhi as a journalist, both these facets of Gandhi developed intertwiningly. So he started writing about the plight of Indian community in South African newspapers. He started writing that. He started writing letters. He started giving interviews, right? But at one point of time, Gandhi realized that doing piecemeal probably will not serve the purpose. If you want to engage with people on a long-term basis, on a sustained basis, probably you need your newspaper for on your own. That is probably what happened. Then Gandhi started the Indian opinion. But before that, his training, if I may use that word, his training in journalism happened when he joined the Boer War, which broke out in 1899, right? And he joined there as a volunteer, Red Cross volunteer. Interestingly, Churchill also covered that war. Both of them wrote reports. Churchill, in his own way, about the military strategy and all. Gandhi is in his own way about people, ordinary people who are caught in this war, right? So both Churchill and Gandhi, the history would see that they meet again. The history would see that both people will meet in conflict situation. But that happened about 20, 30 years later. Initially that was Boer War. And he sent those dispatches to newspapers in India as well, including Times of India. He was also correspondent of a newspaper which Dadabhai Naoroji started. So these were kind of training for Gandhi in journalism. However, as I was saying, at one point of time, he realized that if he wants to connect with people, if he wanted to take the people along with him to fight injustice meted against them, then they must have a voice. They must have a newspaper. And he started Indian Opinion. It was first published on 1903. The first issue was dated June 4th, 1903, but it was released on June 6th. It came out from Durban. A year later, it was shifted to Phoenix settlement. All of you know about Phoenix settlement because Gandhi wanted to experiment with community living, right? So he took Indian Opinion and publication of Indian Opinion also to the Phoenix settlement, where the press workers, they will live together, they will share the workload, and they, instead of getting regular salaries, they will have a share in the profit while cultivating that land and all. That was the idea. That was the idea of community living, which he experimented in South Africa, which tried to experiment again back in India. So this period, the Indian opinion period of Gandhi is very important in forming journalist Gandhi, in forming social activist Gandhi, in forming the reformer Gandhi. Many of his concepts, like concepts of satyagraha, that was formed and framed with Indian opinion. Indian opinion provided a platform for Gandhi to experiment with lot of his concepts, thinking, etc. Gandhi came back to India in early 20th century. He was also arrested in 11th November 1913 for leading a mass satyagraha in South Africa. And as I was telling you, it was Indian opinion and his stay in South Africa which formed this social reformer Gandhi and the social activist Gandhi. Now, he came back to India On advice of Congress leaders like Gokhale, he undertook a journey all through the country to know the country well. And at one point of time, he was taken, thanks to people from Champaran, he was taken on a tour to Champaran to see for himself the plight of the indigo cultivators in Champaran. Now, indigo is kind of a color which was used to color, and it was exported to the cotton mills of England. And the farmers here were forced by the English administration to cultivate indigo, and they were not given remunerative price. So therefore, there was a farmer agitation. He went there to see the condition firsthand, and he wrote what was later known as Champaran Diary. He interviewed, he talked to thousands of farmers and wrote. This is one of the best examples of what we presently call investigative reporting and development reporting. I mean, the word investigative reporting probably was not used then, but the concept of investigative reporting, you go to a place, you talk to people, you try to find out, unearth facts which are somehow hidden, right? It's called investigative reporting. So Gandhi indulged with that and came back and wrote a very poignant report, which was later known as Champaran Diary. So then gradually Gandhi was involved with political movements. In 1919, as the Rowlatt Bill tried to change certain facets of criminal law and all, there was a movement called Rowlatt Khilafat movement. And then Gandhi resorted to mass satyagraha. If you remember, I told you the concept, the how of satyagraha was tried in South Africa, ably helped by Indian opinion. Here in 1990, Gandhi started satyagraha at a larger scale, and he wanted a newspaper to support and take it forward. Then he published a newspaper which was called Satyagraha or Satyagrahi. In the very first issue, Gandhi wrote that this paper has not been registered. It was not registered because Gandhi feared that the newspaper could be closed at any time, and therefore it was not registered, but it would be published to make people understand the concept of satyagraha, the how and why of satyagraha, right? In 1919, she published 2 more newspapers. One is called Young India. Young India was being published by Home Rule Party. They wanted Gandhi to take it over, and Gandhi took it over and became its editor in 1990, Young India. And then there was another paper called Navjivan. It was initially published in Gujarati, then it was published in Hindi, and whatever Gandhi wrote in Young India and Navjivan, later Harijan, it was widely translated. Now, in Young India and Navjivan, Gandhi tried 3 things. One, the major was to propagate satyagraha, to take people to protest against alien rule, right? But through non-violent means. So the Gandhi's idea of resistance, Gandhi's idea of revolution, Gandhi's idea of freeing this country from the shackles of British rule on a particular line, all these ideas were taken to the masses through these two newspapers. I shouldn't say two because there are several language editions of Navjivan. So Young India and Navjivan. Navjivan, acha, Indian Opinion was also published in Gujarati. There were two more editions, two more language editions also, Tamil and Hindi. Indian Opinion I'm talking about. But later the Tamil and Hindi edition folded because there were no people who could write it. Gandhi couldn't get more people to write in Tamil and Hindi in South Africa at that point of time. So his idea of talking in the language of masses, talking in the language that common people of this country can understand, it was there in Indian Opinion as well, and it got accentuated with Navjivan and various language issues of Navjivan. So he propagated his idea of truth, nonviolence, satyagraha, and protest. Now this continued, right? However, the oppression was also there. So these two papers folded, and Gandhiji by then realized that talking about political freedom is meaningless without having social reform. Am I clear? So political independence is meaningless without having independence from illiteracy, superstition, taboos, dogmas, which we have. And therefore, he started another newspaper called Harijan. Harijan is the oppressed class. Now, we have taken other words for that. We call scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, right? The jati pratha and the people who were considered as low caste, and there were terrible oppression against them. They were not considered as human beings at certain parts of this country, right? So Gandhi wanted to get rid of this. Gandhi wanted to get rid of untouchability. Gandhi wanted to get rid of the dire poverty that our society, a part of our society, suffers from. Right? Here I will digress just for a couple of minutes. Recently, Jayatirath Rao is more known as Jerry Rao in management circle, a very well-known columnist also, very well educated in management, started his own IT business. He has a company called Emphasis, etc. Jayatirath Rao. He has written a book titled Economist Gandhi. There is a misconception that Gandhi was against accumulation of wealth. There is a misconception that Gandhi used to love poverty. There is a difference between loving poor and loving poverty. Gandhi wanted and stayed simple. He led a very simple life. His wants were limited. He never led an extravagant life. Gandhi's idea of political reform, Gandhi's idea of economic development, as Jayatirath Rao in his book, and before him in 2011, Bal Patil in his book tried to underline that Gandhi's economic ideas were very modern, and in present post-COVID time, when the economy is going down just in the last 6 or 8 months, we have started looking at some green shooting, but the economy is still down, right? And this is more relevant now, but that is subject of another discussion, another discourse about the economist Gandhi, or Gandhi's economic ideas. But Gandhi's economist ideas were also reflected in his writings. In fact, Gandhi wrote on very many subjects. No subject under the earth was left untouched by Gandhi. So coming back to Harijan, he started this paper in 1933, and it was at that point of time skirmishes with the British administration. It was first suspended in 1940, then again in 1942. It resumed its publication in 1946 to continue till 1948. One thing, Harijan was not a political paper. In fact, if we do a content analysis of Harijan, we will find it dealt with social issues. It dealt with reform, social reform issues, untouchability. And that's precisely why he picked up this name, this title, Harijan. He tried to equate the oppressed, backward, low caste, quote unquote, people as Harijan. Hari is God, Hari ke Jan, Hari is closest people. Now, coming back. The question, how Gandhi as a journalist and editor approached reform. By and large, we see different phases of Gandhi in different newspapers with which he was engaged. If Indian opinion, through Indian opinion, he told us about his initial ideas about resistance, people's participation, satyagraha, etc. In satyagraha, that was the major focus. In young India, it was, we see a political Gandhi. We see him writing more about how do we resist British government, how do we gain independence, how does this movement go, how do we take this movement peacefully without any violence and all. That's what we see in young Indian achievement. And in Harijan, which started in 1933, as I told you, the major focus was social reform, economic development, movement against untouchability, Gram Swaraj, rural development. These are the issues which were mostly taken up in Harijan. So the complete arch of Gandhi, the development of Gandhi from the time when he stood up for Indians in South Africa to the time when he was considered an apostle of peace, Mahatma, apostle of peace, right? The entire arch, life arch of Gandhi could be viewed through the prism of the newspapers that he either published or became editor or he was engaged with. Now I'll end with Gandhi's views on journalism. What were Gandhi's views of journalism, and how he practiced that? He viewed journalism as a form of service. He viewed journalism as a sacred duty. In fact, if I may quote, he said, in my humble opinion, he said, it is wrong to use a newspaper as a means of earning a living. There are certain spheres of work which are of such consequence and have such bearing on public welfare that to undertake them from earning one's livelihood will defeat the primary aim behind them. That was what Gandhi thought about journalism, which probably in the present time, when media industry is $1 billion industry, in India it's 51,000 crore plus industry, probably will not sink, but the core concepts that Gandhi associated with journalism probably holds relevance now and probably will be relevant for all time to come. Right? He talked about the trust readers have on newspapers, right? And this trust is sacred, and newspapers shouldn't betray this trust. He also said that it is often observed that newspapers publish any matter that they have just to fill in space, right? Trivia that goes into newspaper. And he was against that. Trivialization of media, he was against that, right? So what he says, keep newspapers should act for social good. Newspapers should act as a check against evil. Newspapers should act as a kind of conscience keeper. Newspapers should also act as a guide and a teacher. That's what Gandhi wanted newspapers in particular, because in Gandhi's time there was no other platforms. I mean, radio was there. Radio was introduced in India in mid-20s, but it was under government control, so there was no access for others for the radio. And Gandhi didn't like radio till he, for the first time and for the last time, he went to radio, all India radio at that time, and then spoke. So he thought, he realized that radio can have a great power, but he died soon after that. Coming back. So he says, I have taken up journalism not for the sake, not for its sake, but it's a mission in my life. My mission is to teach by example. And he, through his newspapers, which again, at one point of time were considered as views paper, because we get Gandhi's ideas about everything under the sun through his newspapers and discourses. And many of the discourses were either printed on the newspaper or he wrote first in newspapers and then he went and talked it to people in different meetings. So therefore, I'll end with Gandhi's Vani for the journalists. I understand there are many journalism students attending this. So he says, a journalist's peculiar function is to read the mind of the country and to give definite and fearless expression to the mind. That is one mantra of the great sage. The second is service. The third is show people what is right. The role of guide and teacher. If our students do that, learn that, probably that will be the best tribute to the Gandhi on this day, his birthday. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Mrinal sir, for such an enlightening session. When you were talking about the life of Gandhi, I could, imagine those pictures. It was like a documentary that we are viewing, and with such details and everything. Students, there's a student who has asked a question. Actually, there's a subject called development communication that students are studying in semester 3. And there is a small topic called Gandhi's view of development or Gandhian view on development. So, sir, if you can just tell something about how Gandhiji viewed development in short, so that the students can get better understanding of that particular topic.
Right. So I will make it very short, right? Gandhi's views on development could be summed up in just one word: Sarva Bahujana Hitaya. It should, he said, I'll give you a talisman whenever you are doing something. That if think about the lowest of the low, whatever you are doing, if it is benefiting him, then it's worth doing. That is the talisman that he said. His view of development is in sync with the present UN definition of development, which is not centered on GDP, which is not centered on creating wealth. Creating wealth is important, but distribution of that, equitable distribution of that wealth. If the lowest of the low doesn't get a share, and the gap between poor and rich continues to grow, then it will create a huge governance problem. This is what Gandhi said. So his model of development was based on equitable distribution of wealth. That's number one. Number two, sustainable development. He said, and I quote, we have everything. I mean, the nature can give us everything that we need, but there is not everything. Nature doesn't have enough for our greed, right? So sustainable development, and we are realizing that now when climate change is staring at our face, and there are scientific reports that by 2050, about 10% of GDP could be eaten up by climate change. We are now realizing the Gandhian model of development. So one, equitable distribution of wealth, sustainable development, the importance on human resources, which we are realizing now. When you are talking about putting emphasis on startups, we are basically putting importance on individual initiative to create capital, right? Gandhiji used to say in his time. Fourth is Gram Swaraj, making every village an independent economic center of creating wealth, where people will be doing their own work, not on the basis of their job, but on the basis of their experience. And he also talked about Nai Talim. They must be trained into doing it in a better and in a scientific way so that they can have more productivity. It's not only production, but productivity also, right? So this is the fourth one. So these were Gandhi's model of development, which are relevant till now. I'll strongly recommend students, if they can, to read these two books which I referred. One is Jayatirath Rao's Economist Gandhi, which has been released just probably 15-20 days before. And second is Bal Patil's the book on Gandhi's economics. Bal Patil's book, if you type on Google, it's available on net also for reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Just one last question from a student who is saying, can Make in India and its application be equated with Mahatma Gandhi's view of Gram Swaraj. So can these two things be equated?
To some extent, yes, the concept is in sync, but we also have to look at the reality, the global reality presently, right? I believe that's how I look at it. Atmanirbhar is a great concept. Great concept. We have to, produce our own thing. Why can't we produce a surgical knife? We have to import it from Germany, right? We produce steel, but we cannot produce surgical knives. That has to be imported from Germany. You get my point? On this, maybe Atmanirbhar Bharat or Make in India, this is a great concept. But we also have to factor that we have moved on and globalization is a reality. And now, if there are countries where there are better technologies available, maybe we can take those technologies and make things here that is better for us, and that is probably better for the mankind because the developed technology is being used. So that is how I think the core concept syncs with Gandhi, but the operationalization of this concept probably has to take a different turn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. With this, we come to the end of this beautiful session. But before we move ahead with Bala ma'am's, vote of thanks, I would like to, share my screen and show paintings by our HOD, Dr. Susmita Bala ma'am, that shows her, deep admiration for both, Mahatma Gandhi ji, also Lal Bahadur Shastri ji. So these are the paintings that are made by our Professor Dr. Susmita Bala ma'am.
Great.
With this, I request Susmita Bala ma'am to, bring this session to the formal, end.
Thank you, Pramod. Thank you, Professor Mrinal Chatterjee, for uncovering not so known aspects of the life of Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhiji was a lawyer by profession, but he practiced journalism as a mission. He was a development journalist. He was an investigative journalist. He was a field reporter. He was a great editor. उन्होंने समाज में और हम सबके सामने जो सत्य, अहिंसा और सत्याग्रह का पाठ रखा, that was very important, and he propagated through his journalism. So thank you, Professor Chatterjee, for telling us so much about these aspects of Mahatma Gandhi ji as a journalist. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. With this, we come to the end of the program. Thank you very much, Mrinal sir. Thank you very much, Amrish sir, Bala ma'am, all the faculty members of DME Media School who are also part of DME Media School's Research Center, that's RIM, Research and Innovation in Media. Also to all the participants, all the students, and I can also see some of the participants who are not from DME Media School, but they have joined from outside. Thank you very much. There is a feedback form that has been shared in the chat box. You can give in your valuable suggestions and also the feedback of the session. Thank you very much. We'll hope to see you next time, sir.
May I thank the school and Mr. Saxena for giving me this opportunity to speak to all of you. Thank you.
In DME, we believe in engagement and empowerment of its students. And since the time this COVID-19 struck in 2020, we intensified this whole process.
For the education sector, it was a big challenge. At DME, our small dynamic team decided to take this challenge head on.
We organize different kind of programs, different webinars wherein the distinguished people from the industry and other walks of life, they are invited to interact with the students. We try to keep them engaged in taking out newsletter, writing stories, editing stories, and not only that, they make posters, they make cartoons, they write pieces for the newsletter.
Mentoring cell at DME is a very unique feature in the ecosystem of education. While the subject teachers forge the knowledge domain strongly, it is the mentors who reach out to students in difficult times. During pandemic, when our students faced loss of their loved ones, home isolation, and several other family issues, mentors ensured that students remain cheerful, lively, and stay connected with us.
We have ensured that our students are treated with compassion, warmth, and gentle touch. And it has been our endeavor to treat all the academic activities of our students, which includes PSDA, internal assignment, and various other curricular activities accordingly.
Research Cell also pays huge emphasis on interdisciplinary nature of research. In order to promote this, the research centers of the Research Cell were also motivated to join with each other and conduct research activities for students, faculties within DME and outside DME.
While the strong academics and great industry connect is building great lawyers, media persons, and managers at DME, we at Mentoring Cell are enabling these future leaders to be compassionate, emotionally strong, and resilient for any times to come.
We empower the students. All the schools of DME, they have their students council. In DME Media School, this council is spark. They organize the program themselves, they take their own decisions, and they mobilize the students for all the good cause.
Art has the power to unite and connect during the times of crisis. Bringing people together, sharing, soothing, and inspiring are powers of art, which have been made empathically obvious by the DME cultural societies during the COVID-19 pandemic. By taking different innovative approaches in organizing various virtual competitions and events in which the students of DME have taken part with great enthusiasm and proved that DMEians are unstoppable.
Care with compassion is motto of DME. During Corona period, we were always with our students. Their well-being is primary for us. We take care of our students.
We met the expectations of the students, of the parents, and above all of the industry. The placements this year were better than those of the previous years. DME is committed to supporting its students in all possible ways.